When it comes to video game environments, people love talking about the weird ones, utterly pointless areas, liminal hub worlds, level themes that are absolutely ridiculous, or even explorable out of bounds zones. Those are cool and all, but if there's one specific type of area that I rarely see discussed and should really get more attention, it's definitely test maps. This is fucking awesome for none of the reasons why you'd naturally say anything ever is awesome. I mean, most test maps boil down to funny colored blocks and whatnot, and maybe if you're not interested in game development, you don't appreciate what these are all about as easily. But I absolutely adore them, and not only because they have pretty colors, which admittedly do play a part. It's not just the way they give you insight into the development of a game, but also the way the designers figured out the rules and systems that they likely envision and describe to somebody else. You just know some designer gave the character a spin in these places and returned to the people actually programming those systems with a huge list of changes to get their vision across, and also probably make the guy working on all that cry. This let them polish out what they wanted the player to be able and unable to do, and figure out the scale in which the people working on the level should create the different elements we see in the games. It's a bit of a geeky appreciation, but I don't know, there's something special about imagining the conversations that happen regarding these levels. Their aesthetics are also so unique. Being that these spaces aren't meant to be seen by the player, the walls often are super minimalist or just coated with colorful indicators with information, specifically the very distinct checkerboard patterns which likely indicate what the 3D engine interprets as a single unit. All of these elements make for areas I can best describe as odd. But that's kind of what indirectly makes them so fun to look at. It comes across as something that you shouldn't be able to see, something that doesn't have the energy or style of the proper game you're likely familiar with, while still being a part of said product. At the very least, it makes the emotions these areas convey feel peculiar, in a way other spaces known for causing strange emotional effects don't, because these areas exist for an evident reason. I am before someone says they're scary, I disagree. They sometimes have an eerie ambience, or rather an eerie lack of it, but these areas are so deliberate in their design and presentation that they don't stand out as anything more than unusual. They're transparent. Sometimes literally. I adore how a portion of these reveal information about the development pipeline of these games, the way some test maps are made known to fans of each game because they were leaked or simply left over in the files. Test maps are extremely small when it comes to file size. They typically have no textures, barely any code, and at most a list of objects or actors from the final game to load into the space. Not that it matters, since many are known because they were made in that era where game disks had to be filled before shipping, leading to developers purposefully keeping all of these assets in just to make sure that DVDs weren't easily copied or modified. I like dividing test maps into three categories. Category 1 tend to be physics maps, created to test how the physics and movement of the playable character will work. They usually feature inclines and blocks labeled with any relevant info such as angles. Like this test map here from Kingdom Hearts 3. Look at Luigi in the Mario Kart DS test map, finally living his pancake dreams and flipping over and over and over and over. Type 2 is object maps, meant to test out specific objects and mechanics in specific layouts, such as the many object testing maps from Wind Waker. Seriously, there's a lot of these and they occasionally irk me out. They're so lifeless and so to the point. These maps were made for people to fuck around, but the maps themselves are locked in. The final type is the prototype test map, which are usually recognizable as areas you get to visit in the final game. Take a look at these prototype layouts from Dark Souls 1, which seem to imply a lot of the same ideas from the final game despite being a few steps removed. Like in an alternate universe, this ended up being the layout, and it's very interesting to see how some locations like the Valley of the Drakes were added to patch up loose ends from the results of these tests. But I never thought that I'd be so. While it's unclear when each of these maps were used, it's safe to assume they were used all throughout the development in general, because test maps are elemental in getting the game to get to the desired vision, I guess. They get revised several times throughout development, such as for figuring out nuances or having a fast, more controlled space to test features in. This caused the creation of one of the most infamous test maps that should be familiar if you're anything into video games. A map so iconic and common that you may not even realize it's a test map unless I used it for the thumbnail, in which case I apologize for the spoiler. Did you guys know that Subaru dies in GM Construct? No idea what BTC here stands for, but I imagine something like Big Tall Cox. Truth be told, the iconic GM construct has gone through many iterations as Gary's mod continued to evolve. The first version being this white void which resembles a test map among the likes I've shown so far in this video, with textures coming in version 2. These original GM constructs featured button panels to load assets or teleport yourself to select Half-Life 2 maps. Further versions began adding new locations, such as the garage to test vehicles, a room to test lighting effects, or a pond to try dumping your favorite Half-Life scientist into to see if they sink or swim. Yep, there he goes. And the iconic version is the 13th iteration, which added the iconic buildings. You may notice that this map is actively changed as new things were added into the game. The final version doesn't feature the garage or the summon button since all of that was moved to its own dedicated menu. But what really makes GM Construct iconic for me is the fact that unlike most test levels where you're just getting lost around in, this one was created with the intent to be a playground. Why else would they feature little oddities like this inaccessible room on top of one of the buildings, or the detailed buildings out of bounds that you can't even see or access from most locations where you can test visual effects or the way a creation works? Given the nature of Gary's mod, this makes sense that people working on this wanted to make a test area that isn't just useful for developers, but also for developers of further mods for the mod, as well as just general players that downloaded something cool and couldn't wait to try it out. The idea of a test map that's meant to be played around in as a ludic location by the general player base is honestly kind of a novelty. Obviously, most of the test maps are kept by the developer and only playable through hacking, and it definitely paid off in this case because GM is like a sandbox. It's not really something other games should do because those test maps aren't designed the same way. I think I can only think of one other test map I played around in consistently, and that's because the developers of that game did a yikers. The word yikers here is used as an expression often found on the internet to describe a mistake, a praise which Nate is partial to for currently unknown reasons, but he'll proceed to use it multiple times during the next portion of this video, because he finds random gimmicks to be hilarious or otherwise simply notable. Sonic Adventure 2 lets you access a test map thanks to a yikers involving a Chao key. These keys are found around each level and typically allow players to enter the Chao garden after a level, though you can still just enter it at any time through the menu. They are often located in hard to reach locations with the intent of pacing out gameplay for players that are too good and beat levels too fast. Yikers. The thing is, when you pick up a key and beat a level, the game knows it's gotta take you to a different stage than usual, but it only sets what stage that is once the key reaches the HUD and becomes a little sprite as in here. An action it's unable to perform if the camera is particularly far away, as you can see with this specific box from Cosmic Wall in a Yikers location, which easily, without having to do any funny glitches or stuff, replicates the glitch in the GameCube. When the game doesn't know what level to send you to, it defaults to the last value it held, or if it holds no value, 0, which is not City Escape, it's our wonderful test level and its Yikers color palette. Fun fact, in 2-player mode, the value is set when you select a level, but if you play around and hit no after the combat, it actually doesn't reset, which lets you use this same glitch to go to most stages as any character, though some break without using mods. Oh yikers, this is not related to test levels, let's go back on track. The SA2 test level is actually surprisingly bare bones. Some ramps to test whether certain characters can climb up inclines, places for Knuckles to climb and dig, as well as a single rail to test out some basic rail grinding physics. Not even 2 to try switching around to. Yikers. I am a master of words. If I had to point out one of these test maps that tickles my pickles, I'd choose the one from Mario 64 DS. This test map is one of the most complete test maps out there, featuring an assortment of power-ups, several sexy Goombas to accompany you, a skate park, a sensory room, multiple outfits from a deluxe device that is unused in the game outside of this room, a private pool, state-of-the-art invisible poles, a patented Mr. Pit, as well as an alcove on the tackiest wallpaper known to man. I have fond memories of this map, probably for the same reason people love seeing Luigi in Mario 64. This level was my own version of that if we pull a Smash Bros and exclude Waluigi. I sadly experienced this game first through DS since I never owned a Nintendo 64, but the idea of a new level was super exciting, and that's why I have tons of fun memories playing Super Mario 64 DS ROM hacks. I remember one in particular that turned the test level into a playable thing for no reason. Who cares, Mario 64 DS hacking is kinda dead anyways. So remember that funny Nintendo Giga leak that happened which included a bunch of Mario 64 assets? We actually got some of the Mario 64 test levels from it, as well as 2 interesting level prototype maps. I quite like seeing the test levels a lot. These are probably some of the first 3D test levels ever made, and it's kinda surprising to see that their vibes aren't very different from more recent examples. This here is a literal piece of video game history that feels sort of unfair that we don't actually have access to legally if we're interested in game development. An industry where not enough games actually give us deep insight into how the polygonal sausage is made. And then the prototype maps are a whole different creature. I get the sense that these were created for a point in time where Mario was bigger, and they are pretty bare bones, but their names imply they are super duper early versions of Whomp's Fortress or Peach's Castle. Revelations about making 3D video games happened in these halls, such as the scale thing should be so players can see them or the way textures look when sufficiently big. If you sit down to analyze everything around here, you can even notice where some of the artistic design processes took place. It's outstanding, it's important, and even if the developers absolutely hate it, it's something we are interested in. Half-Life 2 Citadel map, the one used at the start of the game, has had early revisions of it entirely prettied up and recreated by fans. This map here has been explained by the developers as a clear prototype they didn't like because of how it combated against their visions for the game, feeling stuff like how the intro sequence was too long and it isn't even the tutorial. This is one of the coolest prototype maps to see because of how atmospheric the fans have made it. The original isn't quite as atmospheric, but it still has all of these events from the final game that should be familiar for some. I am kind of super impressed with how the fans took this map, which was meant to be at most a little oddity the developers decided to share to give us insight into their process, and they turned it into this whole different version of the game. Prototype maps like this are just so fun to explore and speculate about, despite their bare bones presentation. It's crazy to see these one-step removed versions of games because if one thing was different about development, we could have had a completely different game. So we've seen a lot of video game test maps today. They are some of the most unique pieces of gaming content. They have some of the most stupid vibes ever, as they are created for nothing else but gathering data and testing. They have weird ambiances and have nothing to hide. Therefore, it's kind of funny to me that they are literally almost fully hidden within the video games they were used for, if they're at all. Looking at them is akin to bursting down the walls of your house and seeing the support beams that started the construction. One of those little things that you forget are always there. I'm not joking. Whatever it is you're watching this, the thing you have behind you has shit inside it that you have no idea about. What's the shape, thickness, and color of the concrete? How much dust has gathered inside that hollow frame or seat you're on? What's the configuration of the bark on that tree? I swear I haven't hopped any weed today, but you get what I mean. Just like all of those things, video games have stuff inside them that you often forget about while you play. I imagine most of you didn't think for a second that a game such as 2022's God of War Ragnarok went through a mountain of testing maps since game file sizes have gotten so big and developer timing so prettied up that no developer would dare keep that stuff in. So these maps became little relics of what the game engine was like under the hood and other criteria that define the product. Maps that some may find weird and off-putting since you're quite literally not meant to see and explore them, but they also communicate such whimsy about the game design process that any negative feelings just seem to vanish even if you find these maps creepy. There's no feeling like seeing one of these maps and considering how far the project it belongs to came along from that point forward. One of the biggest joys in game development. Sure, the fact that they are designed to be literal in the most extensive of senses helps at not making them that odd, but above all, video game test maps serve as a reminder for developers, even those who are just aspiring to it. Test maps remind us why development games is fun, even if only for 5 minutes when you're burned out after 17 months of development.